present. Oh, hey, there's a student. We got a student here too. We will be recording. I'm Andy Mahan. I'm a professor here at CMU. For those of anybody watching or here present, we wanted to set up this group of select individuals. Yes, you are select individuals. Um, to talk about their career pathways for natural resources and conservation biology type positions. The people that are here are three of my former master's students, the very first, and then the next two out the door that we threw out the door. We have Lucas Nathan, Averill Harder, and Ben Whitelighter, who are going to talk about their. I just want to. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second, but I want them to talk about their pathway and, in particular, what they're doing now and how undergrads in their field can take that next step and go that next direction. If that's how you, the viewers of this recording, or if you're here in the room, so choose to spend the career path. So let's start with Lucas, if you wouldn't mind. Just say how you got here and what you do and what you're doing.
Sure. So my name is Lucas Nathan. Currently, I work for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources in the Fisheries Division, and I coordinate our aquatic invasive species program. So the title, what that means, I end up working with a lot of partners in our state agency, federal level, university partners, tribal partners, local organizations to implement a wide range of invasive species projects, so everything from prevention efforts and working with folks to modify policy and implement strategies to try to prevent invasive species from being introduced. We do a lot of work with surveillance, and then on the opposite end of the spectrum, implementing response strategies to try to manage, control, and eradicate species once they do get introduced. So that's sort of what I do in a nutshell now. In terms of how I got here, started off getting an undergrad in fisheries, so a more, I'd say, really fisheries management oriented background, but early on got exposed to genetic research, which took me down that path for a few degrees. So I came to Central Michigan, worked with Andy on eDNA for invasive species, so using genetic techniques to try to detect invasive species in the bait trade. From there, I got a PhD. I went up to the East Coast, University of Connecticut, and they're focused on brook trout genetics. So still had a genetics theme there. And then from there, came back to Michigan. I did a postdoc at Michigan State University briefly, and then ended up in this position. So really throughout it, I guess I'd say I had a applied research focus with really heavy emphasis on answering questions to inform management. Really led to the state agency pathway. So that's my professional life in a nutshell.
All right. How about you, Ben?
Sure. I'm Ben Whitelighter. My current title is River Sustainability Director. I work for a small watershed nonprofit in Birmingham, Alabama. My career started very similarly to Lucas's. My undergraduate degree was in fisheries management, water resources type work. I kind of started down that fish management path, did some internships and some post undergrad work in the fisheries world, and then decided to take on a master's degree at Central Michigan University as kind of a fisheries person looking through the lens of genetics research for the first time. That helped me sort of figure out what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. Not necessarily that genetics wasn't what I wanted to do, but it certainly helped guide me in the right direction of how I wanted to deal with conservation biology and conservation in general. After CMU, after getting a master's degree, I worked on Great Lakes systems for about 4 years, doing watershed planning, watershed management, and land use planning work to try to figure out how decision makers in those types of systems impact the biology of rivers, which was ultimately what I'm interested in at the core. even if I don't work directly on those issues now. My daily work with the Cahaba River Society, the small nonprofit I work for, is impacting science and policy within this watershed. I primarily work with developers, so commercial and residential developers and municipalities, trying to impact policies that that affect stormwater runoff and what that does to our rivers. We're a fast urbanizing community, and so the way that we deal with our stormwater has major effects on localized flooding issues, on turbidity issues, on flow regimes, natural flow regimes of rivers that flow to Mobile Basin. And these rivers are some of the most diverse in the United States. We have over 130 species of native species of fish, huge numbers of native turtles, native crayfish, freshwater mussels, all those types of things. So it has biological importance, but it also has human importance for the people who live here.
And then April.
Go from the most applied to the least applied. So I'm currently a National Science Foundation postdoc affiliated with Auburn University. Most of my research right now is skewed much more towards the basic end of things. The overarching objective of all of my projects is to describe how fitness, individual fitness, evolves in populations in changing environments and over time. But like stepping back from that, how I got there, I did my undergraduate in biology at Eastern Illinois University. It's a really small, cheapest state school in Illinois. And while I was there, I got involved in a fisheries ecology lab, doing a lot of field work, and also in a cellular physiology lab. And kind of taking the intersection of those two fields, I found conservation genetics and started looking up eDNA and found Andy and went to Central Michigan to do a master's working on Antarctic sea spider phylogenetics. Was still interested, and then went on to Purdue to get a PhD working with Atlantic salmon genomics and transcriptomics, gene expression stuff. And at Purdue is when I started putting together my proposal for this NSF project. So my work at Purdue was all very much applied. And actually that work is still being used by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to guide a lot of their Atlantic salmon broodstock management programs in the Northeast. And I have some ongoing collaborations with them on the applied side of things, and my NSF work is much more basic, and kind of between the two, I'm learning that I'm much more interested in applied questions and how the science that we do can actually impact wild populations and their trajectories into the future. So I'm kind of at that point in my career where I'm sort of still sorting out what I'm interested in. So yeah, in the future, I'm open to pretty much anything. That's a pretty flexible career path so far.
Okay. So you guys have all three been in science for a while now. Go back to your undergrad days. What do you wish you would have known then that you know now? Anything specific about your career path in conservation, natural resources, stuff like that?
I can go first. I guess I wish I would have been exposed to like the fields of conservation and ecology sooner. That's not really something that I think I really could have done differently. I went to community college for 2 years and then transferred to a 4-year institution. And after transferring was actually when I was first exposed to concepts of evolution in the classroom as well. So a little bit more of a lag, but I also think that like, I don't know, I think our field could do a better job at reaching people who maybe aren't exposed to the outdoors or outdoor recreation in their everyday lives, and who don't know that this is a career path that they could take. So that's something that, I really couldn't have done differently, but I can change for the next crop of conservation scientists coming up.
Do you think things like summer internships, summer jobs, things like that should be more widely, like, is that kind of stuff in terms of advertising or whatnot?
Yeah, I think those are great, like in routes to our field. Certainly, I think they would need to be paid in order to change the composition of our field, which has skewed very male and more affluent than less so. So yeah, I think paid opportunities are great, paid internships, whatever. But I also think, where you target your advertising is really important as well to
Sure.
reach folks who need to be included who previously have not been.
So one thing I can note right now is there's at least 1 or 2 labs in biology that are looking to pay students to go work for the summer on biodiversity research with mussels. And I was asked to at least mention that. So if anybody watching this, or if anybody's here in the room that wants a job for the summer, go talk to Dr. Woolnow or Dr. Zanata immediately. They have funded positions that they're trying to fill, and they have very, very, very few applicants. So if you want a job for the summer, you want to get outside, you want to do some scuba diving or snorkel, whatever, go talk to them immediately. There, my plug for that one is good. Ben, what about for the next? What about you in terms of somebody wants to do nonprofit work with a natural resources career? What do you see as a pathway? Do you wish you would have skipped grad school? Do you think grad school helped, or I realize it helped you make your decision on what you didn't want to do versus want to do. I get that completely. What do you think? What would you tell students who are coming up in, as an undergrad biology major that are interested in at least exploring that type of career pathway?
Yeah, I would say probably what I learned through undergrad, or what I wish I would have learned in undergrad and through getting a master's degree, was that those are good steps along the way. But you don't have to be a specialist when you're 18 years old. You don't have to be a specialist when you're 24 years old. You don't ever have to be a specialist, really, to if that's not what you want to be hyper focused on a single topic or a single skill. It's actually quite beneficial in the natural resource world to be a bit of a generalist, to pick up a lot of skills as you're going through those types of programs. Because as a small nonprofit, which we're probably a reasonable size nonprofit from in comparison to others, we have 7 employees, but as a river sustainability director, I also have to edit a website and do some fundraising. Like it's useful to pick up as many skills as you can in the natural resources field, and you don't have to know as an undergrad that you want to be a geneticist, or you want to be a muscle researcher, or do cell biology or whatever. If those things interest you, like Andy said, go get an internship, try it out for the summer. If it's not what you want, it'll teach you something about what you do want. And as you collect those experiences and those skills, every one of those comes back to benefit you at some point in the future, regardless of whether you go into a nonprofit, an NGO field, or stay in academia or go work for an agency. Those skills and experiences, and the diversity of them, is what makes a successful career path, I think.
What about you, Lucas? What do you think undergrads need to know in terms of potentially applying for, maybe even a summer job working with DNR, or a potential career right out of undergrad with your organization?
Yeah, I guess the the one thought I had was, similar to Ben. He stole my thunder on that one, but which was the idea of sort of the diversification of skills. I think is really important. I think grad school sometimes trains you to be that specialist, and that's great. But the reality is, you could spend however many years pursuing a degree, maybe studying topic X in ecosystem Y, and the chances of you landing a permanent job doing exactly that is unlikely. And I think that's okay because echoing Ben's comments about acquiring those skill sets is really beneficial, and there's oftentimes transferable skills, and just the need to have a diversified skill set is really important. I mean, just in my day to day, I go from doing really analytical things on my own, writing computer code, and then the next day I'm doing outreach to local groups, and then the following day I'm reading and modifying state laws, and then the day after that I'm working with geneticists and chemists, and so it's kind of having that broad experience I think is helpful, which sort of aligns with a lot of approaches that I took, trying to acquire those skill sets and think about how to apply them in different ways. So yeah, I think you hear about that a lot. I think going through undergrad, like get skills, but whether it's getting the short-term positions, or even if it's oftentimes you hear grad students that are seeking help for a day doing something, and the number of times that I've got a day's worth of experience and then reflected back on that one experience in some application. It happens a lot more than you'd think, even if it is a random event, or a small blip in your otherwise extensive career path. So we always heard that, I think, through undergrad, but it certainly seems to be truer and truer, I guess, the further along I get in the career, that having those opportunities and jumping on them as much as you can is really important. And along those lines, I think the one that me reflecting back, I think the spot that I missed was the human dimension side, for sure. We get trained on studying critters, but in the agency realm, you're managing people, as much as you are managing the critters. So that was always the area that, looking back on my career, I've been exposed just enough to really appreciate having partners that have those social science type skill sets, and I recognize that I don't, and therefore really value those collaborations. But if I could go back, I think that'd be one thing that I would try to emphasize more along my career path.
So more of a potential like project management type of experience, or program management type of experience.
No, more like the human dimension side of what motivates people, what motivates them to change their behaviors, how do they identify their values, and how do their values reflect their actions. Those are oftentimes things we're challenged with. Within my invasive species realm, we know what can potentially stop invasive species from being introduced, but it's getting the folks out there that might be playing a role in those introductions to take the necessary steps to prevent them. So it's sort of understanding humans and their behavior and their motivations. So it's a whole other realm of science that, as biologists, I don't think we typically get as much exposure to than we do going out and capturing fish and measuring them and tagging them and releasing them and counting them again. Those skills don't necessarily get you ready for studying humans.
So figuring out why the person was doing what he did when he was arrested in Wisconsin, selling big header silver carp last week.
Yeah, and understanding, there's oftentimes complex motivations that go into some of those behaviors, but it's an important part of what we do to protect and conserve and manage natural resources.
What else? How about any of the students in here have any questions? We have a nonprofit, an academic, and somebody working for DNR here. If you have questions about potential activities or jobs or whatnot, anybody have any questions? I don't need to dominate all the questions. One, two, three, four, 5, 6. Nobody. How about any of the other people in here? Mallory, questions for these three?
Yeah, I have a question. Did you find that it was really, I mean, a number of you have talked about your exposure to genetics. And so, and having that kind of interest. So, and there's some social sciences classes. And so, what kinds of other experiences or coursework at this stage would you recommend for undergrads kind of pursuing your career path, like in terms of coursework or experiences? And then what are things that when you're hiring that really stand out to you on resumes, or if you were to bring someone into your group at that freshly graduated stage?
I'll start with that because I want to start off by echoing Lucas's emphasis on social sciences and just how important that is. Um, and that sort of is what stands out to me on resumes is if people have those types of experiences, it helps me know that they they understand people or that they care to understand people, and that helps in who you're working with, who the general public, your constituents, your stakeholders, whatever. But it also helps within an organization of either leadership skills or management of people or understanding of the different backgrounds that either your coworkers or your constituents might have, that our situations aren't all the same. And I just think social science brings an element that we don't often think of as biologists, as deeply trained biologists. So those are the type of skills that I sort of look for when I'm talking to potential candidates or whatever. But another thing that I would encourage people to build strengths with would be um, writing skills, speaking skills, and like persuasion or advocacy type skills. Um, those things come up so much in the nonprofit world where we're sort of fighting for our seat at the table, and it really does take some convincing um, of the different sides to get your seat at the table and to have them take you seriously, and that certainly applies to scientists and even to agency folks. Um, so understanding persuasive techniques or just communication and in general, I think is a really important thing. Even if you know for certain that you want to be a lab scientist, I think understanding how to communicate your science and make it relevant to a general audience is an important thing.
So on top of all of that, what about the computer side of things in terms of programming, informatics? I I figured something out this morning that I've been trying to figure out programming wise for 2 years. Like just to be able to figure out something, and it all worked out this morning. So I'm on a St. Patrick's Day high because of that. Having not had I had one program in, you want to date myself, my computer programming language in undergrad was Q Basic. Okay. So it's stuff you guys like might as well be on a Commodore 64, which you guys still haven't even heard of. So how much do you advocate for, especially Averill, who's more on the academic research end of things? How much do you advocate for that sort of stuff in the more focused conservation natural resources uh, uh, area?
Yeah, I mean, Lucas can maybe speak a little bit more to like applicability on management side of things, but definitely in and conservation genetics as well. But in conservation genetics, definitely, I mean, you can't really analyze our data sets anymore without knowing a programming language. Um, so I think R is pretty common for in conservation genetics, and I'm guessing in management and like ecology and non-genetic data sets as well. Um, Also, just like basic Bash scripting and potentially Python. Um, a newer language that folks are using a lot. I think it's a language or a system is Julia. I'm unfamiliar with it, but it might be something to keep an eye out for in the future. But definitely like coding and computer science classes would be really helpful, as well as statistics. I don't think you can ever learn too much statistics. That's how I feel every single day anyway. So those are some practical recommendations. And then sort of on the, I mean, as an academic scientist, we don't often get involved in human dimension stuff too much. But if you're interested in genetics going forward, I would really recommend kind of reading up on the history of the study of genetics a bit to get a more nuanced feel for kind of the darker side of genetics research and sort of the fraught history of genetics. I think it's important to keep in mind how the research that we're doing that seems very basic could potentially be exploited in ways that aren't so positive. So I would recommend, what's that? There's a book about David Starr Jordan that came out not super long ago. No such thing as
It's
a
on the
fish or
bookshelf behind
something.
me somewhere.
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a ton of really excellent books that I would also recommend you check out if you're into genetics to kind of keep the potential societal impacts of our work in mind as you're growing and learning in the field.
Is it the why fish don't exist?
Yes, there's that book, and then there's also a book called Superior: The Return of Race Science that's also very interesting and I think should probably be required reading for genetics majors. So some practical recommendations and then something to like help you keep humans in mind as you're doing your work.
Anybody else have questions for these three?
Yeah, Lucas, would you mind chiming in about what you're looking for teams when and student, new recruits at the DNR?
Yeah, I think the big ones would be obviously the technical skills and knowledge is obviously always a big part of you know, our job search. You know, that we're looking for someone that has the skills to go out and get the work done. So oftentimes with the fisheries realm, it's the boat driving and the net setting and handling fish, those kinds of things. But typically, when you see people come through programs that are natural resources or even more specifically fisheries, those skill sets are pretty well built into the program. So oftentimes you get very similar CVs from that regard in terms of their experiences. So I think some of the things oftentimes kind of pop off the page. I'd say that the two of them to me would be the communication side of things that Ben mentioned, and that can be whether that's in a direct experience, crew lead type position where they're communicating work with staff, but also transferable skills. Whether it's you work in retail or whatever, those skills can come in a lot of different ways. And the ability to communicate and manage a team is really important. And then to the more we'll call it nerdy side of things, which I'm always partial to. I'll admit that, but I always look for some of those skills too, in terms of the computer programming, database management, geospatial abilities. Making maps and making maps well and present. And being able to present that information is important. And I would say in very high demand. I've been in this position for 3 years now, and despite not really having a broad database part of my job description, I quickly got involved in helping to develop some code to rewrite, a package that helps to access our statewide databases, across our various efforts we have across the state. So and it's because there was a need. So those skills are really applicable in a lot of different ways, and it can be really helpful to help use and summarize and communicate information. So certainly those types of computer programming type skills are really valuable.
That's great advice. I think I'm in biotech, medical side of science, and we're seeing the same things for programming. So it sounds like you you guys have quite a diversity of career paths. So if a student's kind of deciding, what they want to do, what is your favorite, your favorite thing about your job, and what is one thing that you don't really,
That's a good one.
that is a downside?
In my current role, I have the same answer for both questions. Is what I like most about my job is that I oversee our statewide program, so it means I'm involved in a lot of different things, but oftentimes not to the level of depth that I'd prefer. So I end up being spread pretty thin, which is really cool because I get to be involved in a lot of different projects and work with a lot of different people with very diverse backgrounds and skill sets and areas of expertise, which is really fun. But oftentimes, I mentioned my interest in the nerdy side of things. Sometimes that being able to sneak away and punch away on some computer programming is of interest to me. So I'd say it's one of the downsides is just in my specific role, I don't have the opportunity to really sink teeth in as much as I maybe used to in the grad school days.
What about you, Ben?
I was gonna let Averill go first because mine is
sorry.
cheating. No, it's fine. Mine is just cheating. So I'll have two favorite parts because my favorite part is that I get to go canoeing all the dang time because I need to be monitoring the river and on patrol and looking for bad things happening out there. So I have an
That's why I get to
excuse
see
to,
your social media pictures all the time, just canoeing down
yeah,
the river,
yeah. So I get to do that as part of my
cooler in the
work.
middle of the boat. That
Yeah,
sounds horrible.
yeah, it's part of my job description and part of my task list. So that's cheating. So probably one of the most gratifying parts. I wouldn't say it's my absolute favorite, but one of the most gratifying is that I work with some very diverse communities, and um, some of the things that we advocate for are what some would say are basic human rights, as far as environmental access and clean water access and pollution concerns. So it does feel good to be at least making an effort to do societally beneficial things. Um, but the flip side of that is I work in Alabama. Alabama is a incredibly challenging state to do environmental work and to actually have successes. So I haven't been in this job for an incredibly long time, but I would say that I probably win less than 2% of my battles. So it can be very gratifying when you do win some of those battles, but um, it's hard to take a beating that often and stay encouraged and motivated to keep doing the work that you're doing. So that kind of fits into both columns. Is that that part of my job really sucks, but it also is part of the reason why I enjoy doing this and why I like to do it and why I keep coming back is because it is a challenging state and there's a really strong community of people working on environmental issues down here, and so that's really encouraging and really motivating.
That's awesome. What about you, Averill?
My job is a lot less inspirational than that. So as a postdoc, I think your experience would really a postdoc is basically after you finish your PhD, it's just kind of like a research scientist position, but less well paid than the title of research scientist. And so as a postdoc, because I'm done with classes and all the other admin stuff, I really have a lot of freedom to just work whenever I want and kind of on whatever I want. I have certain objectives in my research that I'm trying to get to, but I can also fill in that time with other little side projects and things of whatever I think is interesting. So I enjoy the basic research, but also being able to keep working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to see data translated into management solutions is really rewarding. So just kind of being able to decide how I spend my time and the questions I'm really interested in. I think that's the big plus of being a postdoc. That'll depend on like who you work for and how you're paid. But it's working out for me right now. The downside is, yeah, there's usually not a ton of institutional support for postdocs. So that's kind of the downside of this particular stage in this career trajectory. And everything is also, you know, somewhat short term, right? You don't get a postdoc contract for 10 years in the United States. That's possible if you want to go abroad, but that's not really how the system works here. So you have to be willing to, you know, potentially change positions, change schools, labs, locations, whatever, every 2 to potentially 4 or 5 years. So that kind of temporal instability is probably my least favorite bit of this part.
Yeah, I think that one's an important one, and I think one that crosscuts just about any path in our field, unfortunately. You know, whether it's a agency technician position or, you know, an academic route that results in grad school, maybe postdoc after that, is, I think, it's becoming more and more challenging to get a bachelor's and walk out and get a full-time position that you're gonna work into until you retire. I think it's very few and far between. I can't say I've ever met someone in our sort of cohort over the last several, you know, decades, really, that have gone that path. So it's challenging. So it's certainly, flexibility seems to be key, both in terms of where you're thinking you might want to end up and what you might be working on. I feel like that drastically increases your probability of at least, you know, obtaining some future, you know, career opportunity. Yeah, it's a challenge though, and certainly speaking from someone that has, you know, on the personal side of thing, that has a partner that's also in the field, you know, then that's another challenging part of our field. And it's becoming more and more common that you meet your life partner in the, you know, in your training years, you know, in grad school or undergrad or whatever the case may be, and navigating that on top of it is challenging, just because these positions can be really hard to find.
So do you guys, I mean, the three of you, are you hopeful for the job market in this field in the future then? Do you see it going up? Do you see it, you know, being stable? Do you see, you know, people forgetting about conservation and just, you know, watching the world burn as the ship sinks, or what?
That's depressing.
I know.
Yeah.
Um, in my field, certainly in the stormwater, water planning, water resources, both in water quality and water quantity, I don't see those types of jobs going anywhere, and they don't. I'll say they don't depend on. They are environmental jobs, but they don't swing quite as much as other environmental jobs in changing state and federal administrations. Like flooding ain't going anywhere. Drinking water problems are only going to get worse, in my opinion, going forward. So I think those types of roles, and they don't have to be necessarily advocacy roles like the role that I'm in. They can be agency or academic scientists in those types of positions as well. But I don't see those types of jobs kind of waxing and waning in the same way that sometimes agency or technician jobs wax and wane with, depending on political whims and other things, priorities. So I'm hopeful for at least my career trajectory and the topic areas that I focus on, that it's a relatively sustainable and relatively universal market that, as long as it's not in the middle of a desert, should be pretty much universal throughout the country or throughout North America, really.
Yeah, it's there will always be, you know, in our current model of management, you know, state agency type positions, but in terms of the number of them, it's certainly at least in Michigan, is declining. I think in the last 50 years or so, I think our capacity, at least the fish division, has been reduced by about 40%, just in terms of full-time biologist positions. So it's certainly shrinking. And sort of the motto, it seems, within our world is do more with less, and that seems to ring true, at least in current time. But there's oftentimes opportunities for funding, at least from the invasive species side of things, which is one small bit, but what I'm focused on, we benefit from federal funding through GLRI in particular, so Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which provides a lot of funding. But there's a challenge in that too, in that it's based on federal funding levels that are subject to change over time with administration. So that's definitely a challenge, just in terms of getting work done and predicting out in the future, and planning for some of that variability is tough. But at least in terms of our core state funding, it's certainly decreased over time in terms of our capacity.
So in all of this, it goes back to what you guys were talking about earlier. Make sure you have those special extra skills, the people management, the programming, the this, that, or the other that you talked about earlier. You need to have that to make yourself stand out, especially in this type of fluctuating or even potentially shrinking type of job market.
Yeah. I think in an ideal world, from a state agency perspective, it'd be ideal if we had all the field biologists we need, and we also had social scientists, and we also had geneticists, and we also had database people that's all they did, but that's not the reality. The reality is you gotta do a little bit of everything. It's sort of where that jack of all trades has to come into play, and rely on those partnerships. This is also essential, which is also coming back to the communication side of things.
Eventually, we'll all just be masters of none.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a
Nice.
question for Avril. Are you planning on staying in academia then? You were talking about postdoc, and they're not. Are you listening to them going, "I'm going over there," or you chose academia here? It's just you like it. Are you planning to stay into it? I'm going to look for a permanent tenure type track position, or
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm staying in it for now. So I think that, speaking of trends, it seems as though there are lots of job postings, well, not lots, but job postings at what used to be known as R1 or very high research activity universities are trending towards data science cluster hires, where they say, we're looking for a data scientist. You can work in chemistry, geology, biology, whatever, send us your CV. And so these types of jobs typically get like thousands of applications. And then more focused job postings that say, I know of one at Ohio State recently where they were looking for a like conservation geneticist or a genomicist hire. I believe that job posting got 300 applications. So these jobs are few and far between, and there are tons of hyper qualified candidates for every single one. So I'm not taking that option off the table, but I'm certainly not putting all of my eggs in that basket. And this again comes back to maintaining a diverse set of skills, because many of the skills that I could use to like build and maintain a research program at a high research activity university are also very marketable in industry or private sector jobs. So I would say that if anyone is interested in following a strictly academic path, you might want to revise your mindset a little bit and just keep a very open mind, because there are certainly no guarantees in the academic path. I know plenty of folks who would be absolutely wonderful professors and mentors and advisors who just aren't going to get the chance because there aren't enough jobs. But if you keep an open mind and keep an eye out for picking up, diverse skill sets, you're not going to just hit a dead end because you can't get a tenure track job. There are going to be other exit doors, I guess. So I don't know what I want to do. To actually answer your question, I'm open to tenure track positions. I'm also very interested in like state or federal agency geneticist jobs, or really anything.
I saw a G15 position open in, what is it, Bozeman today for a conservation geneticist.
Missoula, yeah, I checked Missoula rent prices and decided not to apply to that one. So, but it would be a very cool job if you're willing to pay $2,000 a month for a 500 square foot 1-bedroom apartment.
That's horrible. Yeah. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Anybody that's here, the students?
I'm not a student, but can I ask a question?
Absolutely, Greg.
Hey, so I know, so like a lot of these, our undergrads will watch the YouTube recording later on, but for their benefit, could you mention something you did, like a summer opportunities? I know Mallory asked about courses but like summer internship, something that was really valuable that, you know, things to look for our undergrads that are hopefully looking or have already found something for this summer.
So I didn't do one, but I know that you can search for NSF, is it REU experiences?
Mm-hmm.
That lots of different institutions host in all different areas of research and stuff. And those experiences, I believe, are paid. So I would start by searching through those and applying to particular experiences you're interested in. Definitely just getting involved in research during the undergraduate stage to whatever capacity you can is going to be immensely helpful. And it's even better if it's paid. So keep an eye out for, I don't know, at Purdue, they like different labs would post flyers and stuff just in the hallway. Like, we're looking for a paid tech for the summer, but a more formal search, you could look for NSF REU experiences.
Yeah, I think the two for me that sort of paved the way for my career were, one, and as an undergrad, I somewhat by random chance expressed interest in getting involved in the genetics lab at the university that I was working at, or I was going to school at, and ended up getting sort of a temporary position working in the lab, which was really my first exposure to all things genetics, which, as I mentioned in my intro, that led to a master's work and my dissertation work. So that really opened up a lot of doors for future work. And the second one, in between years of my undergrad, I got a seasonal position with the Fish and Wildlife Service doing some brook trout survey work up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And that experience sort of combined with the genetics experience is exactly what I did for my dissertation work, which was brook trout genetics in Connecticut. So somewhat at the time, both seemed like, oh yeah, you know, that sounds like a fun opportunity to learn some genetics, and oh yeah, that sounds like fun. I'll go do some brook trout surveys for a summer. Those two somewhat random events, you know, both sort of paved the way for my future career. So I think that's oftentimes what happens is you get those types of opportunities, and if you can jump on them and get that experience, you never know where it might lead. So you know, that's kind of comes back to that diversifying your skills and yeah, soak up as many opportunities as you can.
And my recommendation would be, this doesn't work for everyone, but if you can find a job that's going to pay you and you're either in a personal state or financial state that you're able to leave home for a summer opportunity, if that's a possibility for you, there's a lot of opportunities that I could have taken that were real close to home that would have been convenient and all that stuff. And I was fortunate to find a couple of internships that first of all paid me, and then were field based in a way that the employer felt it necessary to house me for free. So that also took off some of the financial burden. But if you see those types of opportunities come up,
and you're in a position to be able to do something like that, definitely leave home. That'll expose you to more different ecosystems, different topic areas, things like that, and that can be incredibly useful. Places to look for those that I looked back when I was looking, and still advise people to look, would be like the Texas A&M job board has wildlife jobs, it has fisheries jobs, it has water resources jobs, it has a very wide variety. But whatever general area, if it's fisheries, look on the American Fisheries Society board. If it's wildlife, look on the Wildlife Society or whatever they are board. But look for opportunities that may not be in the hallway that you walk down every day. Look for a different state or even a different area within the state that you're currently in. And if that's an opportunity or a possibility for you or your family, try to make that happen if you can.
Also,
Good advice.
beyond the job board searching too, certainly that's always place number one. The old sort of cold email asking, whether it's a professor, professional, whatever the case may be. Sometimes opportunities are sort of coming down the pipeline that you might be able to hear about. That's how I started doing the master's project with Andy at CMU. It was a random email after I saw a presentation at a conference like that. So you just never know, some of those opportunities that might be out there just not posted. And I get emails, currently from students in particular that are seeking seasonal positions or permanent positions. And I keep a folder of people that reach out and try to blast them through the network when I do have opportunities that come across either within our division or other positions that get forwarded to me. So that communication aspect can be helpful too. You never know when some of those random emails might land you something, or at least make you aware of positions that might be available.
Awesome. We should probably start to at least think about winding this down. Anybody have anything else? Let these three get back to their day and let Ben go back to celebrating St. Pat's a little bit more, maybe in a canoe somewhere.
I just wanted to thank all of you for giving us an hour of your time today, and I learned a ton, and I think this will be really useful for our students deciding on which EEC careers they want to pursue. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.
Yeah, guys.